I told Gilda I was prepared last week. And then this week has kind of been a strange week, and so I don't feel as prepared today as I did last week. But I am so glad to see so many of you, and I'm so thankful for the sun. You know, when I was in the schools, I would watch the teachers. If we had 2 or 3 days of rain or overcast, boy, you could tell it in the teachers and the students. Their attitudes kind of went like this. You know, we thrive on the sun, and especially in West Texas, we do. And last night, my friend from Midland sent me it's a long email, or I'd read it, and it's called Texas Winter. And it's talking to the people who've moved into Texas and how we go a little crazy in Texas. We don't know how to drive on the snow and ice. Don't mention snow tires to Texans. And if you're looking for a sled, don't. Just get you a paper bag or a trash can, go down the hills. Right, we know we don't have hills, but you can go down the driveways and slide into the fences or whatever, you know, and it's real cute, but it's long. But it said tomorrow you'll be back in your shorts and flip-flops. So, yes, ma'am, did you have your hand up for?
Oh, she just needed a hand.
You needed a paper?
Yes.
Oh.
3 more. I needed or Becky. If they don't, got you. Beverly.
Should make him.
We have, you know, that's that saying, Texas is so big that you can go from one end of the state to the other and you'll have completely different weather. But my sister who lives in Corpus went about 50-something hours without electricity last week, and they work from home. And so it was very difficult. My sister-in-law in Belton, she and her husband, my husband's brother, were with 63 hours without electricity or water, and he's on oxygen. So fortunately, their son helped take care of that and brought in a big, big generator. So she said, I cooked in the bathroom this morning, first time experience. I'm not sure what she did, I didn't ask. She has all kinds of slow cookers and Ninja flat deal. She loves kitchen gadgets. And she said, we're really cozy in the bedroom. The TV was hooked up to the generator. She has probably a mid-sized refrigerator and microwave in their bedroom for her husband. So if she ever leaves, T-Bone can get up and that is a nickname. T-Bone can get up and get something to eat. He won't go without eating. And she said, you know, I can cook in here on a little kind of hot plate deal. So, and then my other friend in Midland, she went 3 days, 4 days, 5 days without electricity, and her water well, the pipe burst. So their neighbors were going after water and bringing it in so that they could flush the commodes. But she said, I miss having a shower. So we in Lubbock, I mean, we never went without. We were fortunate, and I feel sorry for those who didn't. When I went to Walmart Saturday, there was no water, gallons of water, of course, and there weren't any. And most of the cupboards were bare. But as the lady said at the checkout, the trucks can't get to us yet. So hopefully this week is better with the sun out. I know tomorrow is supposed to be cooler and the next day cooler, but it will be spring eventually, I think. So this was a long lesson that this author wrote, and I wanted to gather up little bits of all of it. It was so good, and it's a parallel. She drew some parallels in this story I never even had thought of. But she began, this story is on love. Jesus promised to love us no matter what. And in Romans 8, if you have a Bible, you can turn there, but in Romans 8, 38 through 39, for I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any power, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. If you just think about that for a moment, nothing can take us away from God's love. And so, you just need to study that scripture for a while to kind of grasp what will be in this lesson. This author came to America in the 80s, and one of her favorite things was the Paul Harvey hour. And I loved listening to Paul Harvey. I always thought it was great. I loved to hear the rest of the story. And she illustrates this beginning of this lesson with a quote from him. In times like these, it helps to recall that there have always been times like these. Now, I don't know what he'd say about the mask, but he was right about, things have been the same. And so he'd always end with, I'm Paul Harvey, good day. And that's my best imitation. And so she begins with a story that he told one night. It seems that there was a man whose wife and children were going to the midnight service, and he chose not to go with them. And so as they left, he stayed in the house. He saw that it began to snow. And then he began to hear things against the window. So he thought, well, maybe snow was heavy, but he looked out and it was birds. They were hitting the window trying to get into the house. They saw the light in his house. Well, he grew concerned and he dressed up very warmly, and he decided he'd go to the barn where they kept a pony and open the doors and put a light in there so the birds would all come to the light. And as he went out, the birds scattered from him, but he made the trip to the barn and opened the door. He couldn't get the birds to come in. The closer, he even went and got bread and made a trail for them, and they still went the other way. But he thought, well, maybe if I get out there and gather them up, the closer he'd get to them, further back they'd go. And he thought, they're going to die out here because they won't come to me. But then again, I'm a big preacher. They don't understand. And about that time, he could hear the church bells, and it was ringing out the song, "Oh, come, all ye faithful, come, let us adore him." And he fell to his knees because he realized that there was love and how much love God had. And he applied it all with him being like God and the birds being like people who scattered and didn't realize the love that God had for them. So she opened her lesson with that little story. The story today is about the woman who hemorrhaged for 12 years. Did any of you get to reread the story? Oh, good. You have to go back and reread it. This woman, we can't even imagine, probably today, how horrible, how ostracized she was. This is a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, hemorrhaging for 12 years. Back then, even during the times of the monthly period, women were deemed unclean. And then for 7 days after that. anybody who was bleeding was unclean. She could not touch a dish because then it would be unclean. Any chair that she sat in would be unclean. And for 12 years, she could, if she were married, she couldn't have touched her husband. He would have been unclean, or her children, her community, no love. You couldn't even go up and just put your arm on her. You would have been unclean because you had touched this woman. I can't even imagine what she must have felt like. But many times as Christians, we could feel ostracized by our church members if we've done something that's wrong, and we feel like nobody would love us, could love us because we've done something wrong. So we have a little bit of what she might have felt like. Back then, the law was so different from now. And so you kind of have to put yourself in her place and think about being isolated for 12 years. And you know, last week, with the beginning of COVID and last week, we felt isolated at times. Now, I have a lot of children and grandchildren here. I'm never isolated. But, you know, with it snowing last Sunday, we didn't get out. And I tried to imagine what it would be like if we couldn't get out at all, to go anywhere or do anything. And this woman, but yet she didn't feel love. I can't imagine not touching another human being, getting a hug, or holding a child or a grandchild. And so this is what this woman was faced with. Well, Jesus was coming to Capernaum to see, you know, every time he tried to get away, wherever he went, there were people waiting. There was always a crowd. And this woman had apparently had heard that Jesus was coming and traveled 30 miles to be around Jesus. And so imagine the crowd. I was trying to think maybe like before COVID, like the football games, or maybe even in the, I don't know, mall or someplace like that where you're surrounded like a lot of people. And, or maybe even in the vestibule on Sunday morning, you kind of wander between people. Here was this woman who thought, if I could just touch him, I would be healed. Think about the faith. But think about maybe the struggle. If I touch him, do I make him unclean? And she wasn't becoming a spectacle, because if she did, everybody would have moved away from her. Because the crowd was pressing in on him, on her, and yet she managed to touch the hem of his garment. And immediately, she felt healed. Immediately, she knew she was well. And immediately, Jesus felt the power go from him. Can't even imagine what that would be like for either one. And then Jesus turned around and said, "Who touched me?" And if you think about that, what would his disciples have thought? What do you think they thought?
What do you mean? People all around you.
Right. They must have thought, oh my, you know, what's wrong with you? People are touching you everywhere. And Peter, who asked him what he meant about that, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. Everyone's touching you, Lord. You know, what do you mean, who's touched you?" The disciples didn't get it. They still didn't understand Jesus at that point. He felt that power leave him. It cost him maybe a little bit. And Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me, Luke 8:46 says. And only Jesus was aware at that moment who touched him, the hemorrhaging woman. And so under the Old Testament law, when a woman has a discharge of blood for many days at a time, other than her monthly period, or has a discharge that continues beyond her period, she will be unclean as long as she has the discharge, just in the days of her period. Any bed she lies on while her discharge continues will be unclean, as in her bed during the monthly period. And anything she sits on will be unclean, as during her period. Whoever touches them will be unclean. He must wash his clothes, bathe with water, but he will be unclean till evening. And that's from Leviticus 15:25 through 27. The Bible never tells us why she was hemorrhaging. And the author kind of said, we have a lot of possibilities. Did she have fibroid tumors, a hormone imbalance, and an infection where there was no cure? But she lived under this banner, unclean, for 12 years plus 7 days. Jesus knew the minute she touched him, he felt that power. And the minute she touched him, the hemorrhaging stopped. And she felt well again. Can you even imagine the joy that this woman had? But she was in pain, both body and soul. And you have to think about, she had probably lost weight, lost strength. And how was she going to answer Jesus? What she said, that she had to tell the truth. She didn't, she had to be able to, she pauses. She knows she shouldn't be there. She's unclean. She's untouchable. Anybody that touches her is unclean, so that meant everybody around her. She knew that he needed to leave. He was on his way to cure a little girl who was sick. But the possibility of having God's love changed her. And she would do anything to get what he had. And she said she had to answer. She had to answer that she was the one who touched him. Jesus knew, he knew that she was healed right there and right then. And so she felt that love. But the second part of the story is, where was Jesus headed when the woman touched him and was healed? He was headed to, and I always say Jairus, but Jairus had come to him and said, if you will just come touch my daughter, you will make her well. His faith was strong like the woman's. How do you think he felt when he saw Jesus stop and talk to this woman? Stop the crowds. How do you think he felt?
Especially if, Jesus said the power left him. He could feel like that power was supposed to be for my daughter.
That's a good point. I'm sure he was upset. You could only imagine, maybe angry, I don't know. But he wasn't worried about that woman. He wanted his little girl taken care of. And so what happened next? Do you remember in the story what happened? they came to him and said, your daughter is dead. You don't have to, you don't have to have it. And Jesus said, let us go. And if you remember, or if you reread your Bible, he went on and he took Peter, James, and John, the mother, the daddy, and he made everybody clear out of his house. Now they laughed at him because they thought, oh, he can't do this. She's already passed away. Jesus went into her room and he said, little girl, get up and, he told her to get up and walk. And she did. So, there wasn't, that power wasn't all gone. It was still there. But the parallels in this story are, this little girl was 12 years old. Every day that she was born and grew, here was this woman who was hemorrhaging. Here was this joy. Here was this pain. Here was a child that was raised from the dead. Here was a woman that was healed, even though she had been unclean for 12 years. The love was there. Jesus had the love for all of these people. The faith of this woman and the faith of this father were tremendous. And his love is for all of us. A lot of you don't know that I've been a counselor for people on probation for many, many years. And I've had people come in my office in Lamesa and say, nobody could love me. I've done something wrong. I'm now on probation for 1, 5, 10 years. You know what? They're just begging to hear that Jesus still loves them. And for some of them, you can touch their hearts with your honesty about love from Jesus. For many of them, they need to hear that. Not everybody, of course, especially not at the beginning. But I'm always thankful that I was raised in the church and raised by godly parents. But sometimes we forget, and those who come in later in life sometimes are more excited and joyous because they feel the love for the first time. I grew up with it, and others feel it for the first time when they're baptized later. But that love is there for all of us at any time that we need it. And she gave examples of a couple of women that felt like the church or their community had ostracized them because they had sinned. And that's not what Jesus does. He doesn't ever cut us off. We cut ourselves off. We can walk away from Jesus, but he doesn't cut us off. And so for this woman to not be unclean for the first time in 12 years, just think of the wonderful feeling she had. And for these parents whose daughter was made alive again, just think of their faith in him also. And when she gave a saying that I liked this. Let me go back and find it. When the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, then you will change. God's love helps us through that change. If we leave Christ, and the pain gets so bad, then perhaps we will change and come back to Christ. But the love of Christ is always there. God has promised nothing can change his love for us. He knew the woman touched him. He said to her, it was you who touched me, wasn't it? but she was healed. And I think it's great. This lesson was really interesting. I liked her parallels of the 12 years of the daughter growing up and her of 12 years of being out of touch with everybody. I can't imagine how horrible that would be. And the love that heals all, transforms all, excuse me, and brings life to all. It is the same, that, for everyone. It's up to us to take it in and love Christ. I've done all the talking this morning. Do you have, do you have any questions? Y'all have got a question sheet. Do you have any of those questions you'd like to look at? I'd like for you to go home and read that again, Mark 5:24-34, that is under the Discover. And reread that story. I heard for that woman. I just think it's terrible. And I have a lot of friends who have a lot of afflictions. Nothing like this, but she gave the example of a mother with multiple sclerosis that was brought on by the birth of her child, who tried everything to be healed from it, and every day it got worse and worse. Because there was not a treatment to help her at that time, and so she grew, bitter. But it's just amazing how people endure their afflictions and turn to Christ for the love that He has to get them through all that.
I think when this question here about, or the comment that she was desperate for an answer to her problem, she'd risk everything for hope. On this whole thing here.
Uh-huh.
And when it talks here, she did what she wasn't supposed to do, took a risk of being ostracized more, maybe being punished by the people there, not to mention being corrected by Jesus, maybe, just to touch Him, because that was her hope. And then other people, that they would have discouraged her for doing that. Well, then you go to Jairus, and he's hoping, and people come to him and say, well, give it up. And she's dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. But Jesus heard him and said, don't be afraid, just believe. And I think there's so much right there, not only for this woman, but for Jairus and for us. When it looks like it's done, it's over, nothing's ever going to be the same, we're done. Don't be afraid, just believe. Because there's always hope. Where Jesus may not be what you wanted, but there's always hope. So Jesus did encourage Jairus, as He did her, when He turned around and called her out and said, your faith is healed you.
And that is a wonderful point. And He called her daughter in one of the verses, and that's the only time He used that phrase, was that. So His feelings for that woman were, tremendous. I mean, He knew what it cost her to do that. She walked 30 miles to be there. I mean, I don't walk 5 miles, 2 miles. No, but her faith was driving her, as well as His faith was driving Him to that. And we have to stop and think, is our faith that strong? Right now during COVID, you have to, because it's hard not to be able to come to church service. I mean, I think it's great. We can Zoom and stream it on our phones or iPads or whatever. that we have that capability, but it's not the same as being able to be with all of y'all in the church building together. And that tests our faith and our patience and our belief that God is in control. That's a good point. Thank you.
I was struck, Jesus heals so many different ways in the Bible by putting on mud on their eyes or different things. And when you kept talking about how she couldn't touch anyone, couldn't touch a chair, the fact that she was healed by touching was just amazing. So it healed her body, but it also healed her spirit, that she had that she had the faith to touch him, and that he did call her out on it. And you kind of think, why did he do that? But that he recognized her faith in touching him. And I just think that was amazing that that's how she was healed, by having the faith to touch someone, and that it was recognized around her, that these people saw that she had the faith to touch someone. So I just thought that was really a neat way that she was healed. After all those years of not touching anyone, that's how she was healed, was by touching Jesus.
See, y'all just taught more. Y'all could have all these good points. That's another good point. It's kind of not a coincidence,
But
but
like it healed her soul.
Yeah.
Why would we be touched
touched
by Jesus?
Yeah. Because she couldn't touch anyone.
And I've heard the story a million times, but the fact, I'm trying to picture how she was, because it would be much easier to just kind of, I did it, but she's touching his garment on the ground.
Like very submissive even.
Yeah, so like, was she just bowing down and people are stumbling over her, or kind of how did it look? But, because it would have been easy to just touch him and slip away in the crowd, and she didn't do that, so.
It was like she had to reach out and grab him because maybe so many people were pressed against him. And there is a Greek word in there for tassel, hem of the garment and all, but she did reach out and just what she could.
Maybe that was the part she thought he won't know if I touch way back here. But he did. So.
Well, he did. Those are good comments. Other comments? Well, I never had thought about, all these years too, of the daughter being 12 and her having suffered 12, the same 12 years right there together. I just had never thought about it. And watching this little girl grow up, it would be horrible to lose a child, but to raise this child and and here he stops to take care of something else, and you think he's dead, but like Jesus said, believe. And
I think the 12 is a very important number in the Bible.
7 and 12.
The 12 tribes. And then with the 12 disciples, and then the little girl of 12, and how old was Jesus when he got lost in the temple? 12.
12.
Right.
12 and 7. Both of those numbers are very important. They are.
Yeah, in myself, I want to say something else. Jesus is the Son of God. He knew this woman, she suffered 12 years, and how she can walk so far then without power from him to be able to walk and touch him. She had faith on him, she heard about him, but she could not get in touch with him because of the way the condition where she was. And God knew her, like he knew the Samaritan woman which came to the well. She knew because he is the Son of God, and he knows everything because he created us. And he gave her power to come to show the people around him, which doubted him, I can heal this woman which is suffering for so long, and nobody can touch, and he can raise the girl from the dead because nobody believed that. She can be alive again. Everybody says she's dead. And because God knows everything,
Right.
He wants to prove how much love He had for His people, for us. And that's why He proved He can heal, He can raise the dead, and He is with us forever. And we have to believe, and we are not supposed to be afraid of the corona and choke yourself in the back.
Well, and God heals us. He heals us. If we allow it. And you know, I told someone yesterday, God had to have loved us so much because He gave His only Son for everybody, knowing there would be sin in the world and everything. And I said to a person last night, could you give up one of your children for all the sin in the world? And of course, their answer was no. But, you know, if we put it like that, and I don't want to get into a sermon, but it just amazes me when you think about how much God loves us and how much Christ did for these people. And He came to the earth as a baby. He went through childhood so He would know how I'm going to learn this later, how we feel as humans. And when we sin, we know God's love is there for us.
I was thinking about the way Christ usually healed was by touch. He touched them. And I don't remember ever before that He would heal someone by them touching His clothes.
Right.
She didn't touch His skin, she just touched His clothes.
That was one of the points I wanted to make. It was about the clothes. At first I thought that's odd that the power would go through Him through the clothes. And I thought it's not about that at all. It's about the faith. It's about the faith she had, and then Jairus' faith. And then even, later when the centurion comes and, he says, your child is healed, and he didn't even have to go there. He didn't have to even touch it. He didn't have to do anything. It's all about the faith. But it also all is about, it isn't that he just loves everybody and we don't have to do anything.
Right.
Those people had to do something. They had to have enough faith. She had enough faith that she walked 30 miles, that she touched his cloak. But it started out with me thinking about the cloak, the robe, thinking that was odd that His power would go through his. But then I thought, it's not about that at all. It's about the faith the other people had.
Those are both good points. Because you're right. I was just thinking back, she touched Him first, rather than Him touching.
And He knew it.
Yeah.
Because of the power.
Right.
There's a comment on the back, Jesus never gives us what we think we need. Instead, He gives us what He knows we need.
That's right.
And I got to thinking about the crowd. There had to have been other people around Him that were sick also. And there's no mention of Him healing them, He's more concerned, God's more concerned about our hearts and about making us to be like Christ. And that isn't always going to look like what we want it to look like in order to be more like Christ. It may mean that I have to continue to struggle with pain or with different things, while somebody else may need to be healed in order for that faith to grow. And so just trusting that He knows what He's doing.
Good point. All of you've had good points that are spoken of. That's great. See, y'all could teach this class too. Y'all just don't know it. Anybody else? All right, Gilda, it is yours.